This is one that I had in my back pocket, but honestly, I was only asked one time. But if you get asked this question and you don't adequately prepare for it, you can start just babbling and hello, everybody. Michael Harding here with the Chick-fil-A on Cantor Road. And thank you once again for joining us on episode number 6 of Memorable in Minutes, where we're going to unpack one of the most crucial interview questions that you're going to go through throughout your journey. And this video is a little bit different, so I decided to get some new scenery. I brought it into the restaurant, but this is going to be one of the longest videos we go through because we're going to unpack the 10-minute question of tell me about yourself. This is one that I had in my back pocket, but honestly, I was only asked one time. But if you get asked this question and you don't adequately prepare for it, you can start just babbling and you're not ready for it. So we're going to jump into it. Remember, don't forget about your pillars. We're just going to expand them a little bit. But here is Michael's Tell Me About Yourself in 10 minutes. Here we go. Well, thank you for meeting with me today. My name is Michael Harding, as you probably already know. And growing up, I was a military brat. And I lived all across the United States. I counted it up one time and lived in about 5 different states, 8 different schools, K through 12. And what I loved about that is starting off, I was born in South Dakota, but was really only there for about 3 months before I moved to California. My dad was in the military at this time and got to spend really a lot of formative years growing up between 0 and 5, all in California. Then we moved to Illinois. We were there for about 18 months and transitioned to Colorado Springs, which is beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been to Colorado Springs, but luscious, green, mountainous areas of Colorado Springs. We loved learning how to ski there, how to hike Pikes Peak. Went to the Air Force Academy a few times and just fell in love with Colorado Springs. And then I had a little bit of a culture shock going from the luscious green areas of Colorado to flat West Texas desert. If you've ever been to West Texas, it's so flat you can see your dog run away for 3 days. It's very different. But what we loved about it is we grew up and we settled in this small town in Texas called San Angelo. So if you take a map of Texas, put your finger in the center, that right there is what we call San Angelo. And the reason why I talk so fondly of Texas is because when I was growing up, I did a lot of that moving that I just referred to before I ever went to middle school. So I was able to spend all of middle school and all in high school, all in the same place in San Angelo. I started doing things like Business Professionals of America, where I got to learn how to communicate at a high level in front of business professionals. I started doing science fairs, which is what I loved to do, different experiments that all centered around computer science. I started playing tennis when I was in high school and in middle school and fell in love with the sport. So those are a few extracurricular activities that I did. And being in San Angelo, it's also where I started working for Chick-fil-A. During the summer between my junior and my senior year, I was looking for a job. And I was coming across a friend who used to work at the Chick-fil-A in San Angelo. And I remember walking in on my lunch break while I was still in high school, and I was ordering the food, and this friend of mine looked at me in the eye, started pointing at me, started talking with the owner of the restaurant, started pointing at me again, talking with the owner. And I got my food, walked out because I was going to be late to class. Ended up texting him on my way back to class, and I was like, what was going on there? And he was like, you know what? We feel like you would be a great addition to our team. So I really just coincided well with this friend, ended up being a huge mentor in my life, and started growing within the brand, started working there about 2 months later, and really just fell in love with it. And quite honestly, this was supposed to just be a summer job, something that I was going to do May, June, July, stop doing it and go back into my senior year of high school. And I remember sitting on my couch, this was in San Angelo, talking with my two parents, and they were trying to convince me to put in my 2 week notice. And I just remember sitting here and thinking about how much I loved this job. I loved what I got to do. So I was able to convince them with some negotiation about keeping my grades up and was able to keep working at Chick-fil-A. And now I joke around with my parents and tell them that, they almost ruined this whole Chick-fil-A thing for me by making me resign. But I loved everything I got to do. So I kept doing that throughout the last year that I was in high school. And I remember it was December of my senior year. I'd already been accepted to Texas Tech University, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to tell the owner, his name's Tim, of the Chick-fil-A location, that I was going to leave. And he's poured so much into me. He had just promoted me to be a leader, and I wanted to make sure I was doing right by him throughout this process. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to tell him this, and then all of a sudden the GM pulls me into the office and says, "Hey, Michael, we have an amazing plan for you." I'm like, what in the world's going on? And he just started to unpack how he wanted me to move to Lubbock, Texas, which for those of y'all that don't know a lot about Texas, that's where Texas Tech is, and to help them open up their brand new location in Lubbock, Texas. And I just really felt like the Lord was combining these two areas in my life together. And 3 weeks after I walked the stage in high school, I packed everything up and I moved to Lubbock, Texas to start opening up their first location there in Lubbock. And loved it. Kept working throughout the summer. What was so unique about this location is that it was right across the street from the Texas Tech football stadium. I could take a baseball and throw it and hit the Texas Tech football stadium. We were that close. So game days were a phenomenal experience. Just the buzz of West Texas football was always an amazing thing that I look back on. So I did that, and honestly, I started going to Texas Tech and wanted to be a doctor. And I took that first chemistry class, and I don't know about you, but I was not passionate about covalence bonds and the periodic table. I wanted to do the exciting things about being a doctor. So I remember sitting in the stairway of my dorm my freshman year in college and deciding that I did not want to do this whole 12 years of medical school and residency and internships. I didn't want to spend the next 18 years of my life throughout this journey just to get to the job that I wanted. But that I'd also started a business class about introduction to business and just fell in love with putting the right people on the right seat in the bus. And that's what I wanted to do. So I remember sitting in the staircase of this dorm, and I sent my operator, Tim, a message and just said, "I'm done being a doctor, and I want to become a Chick-fil-A owner operator. I don't know anything about it. I don't know a lot about the brand, but this is what I want to do." And I just remember it like it was yesterday. Tim sent me a text message back that had one word with a whole bunch of exclamation marks on the end of it, and it was "finally." And throughout the next year, we unpacked a lot of going to grand openings, and the GM at the time really poured into me. Tim poured into me and a whole bunch of leaders around me, and started working up within the company. I ended up becoming the GM of that location and helped Tim accomplish some amazing things at that location. However, I kept hearing the story of you have 80,000 people who apply to be owners every single year for somewhere about 300 opportunities, and just felt like I needed something to propel my story, to bring it to the top of the page so that I could achieve the goal that I wanted. So I decided in 2016 that I was going to join the leadership development program with Chick-fil-A. So I just started traveling, living out of a hotel 51 weeks out of the year. And really there were two arms to this program that I was a part of. On one end, I would start off by being an interim manager, where when one operator leaves a location, before the next one comes in, there's a grace period. And what happens during that grace period is Chick-fil-A Inc. will come in and make sure that everything is up to standard. I was the liaison who was tasked to go into the location and do that role. On the second side of things, that second arm that I refer to within the leadership development program is what we call a grand opening supervisor. And the role of a grand opening supervisor is to go on site about 6 weeks before a grand opening of a brand new Chick-fil-A and help set up systems and work with the new owner to make sure that everything is set up the way that it needs to. So we would kind of combine these two things into the leadership development program. And I did that for about 30 months and had a slew of stories that we can work through and talk about later. But my favorite part about that process was I was able to meet my wife. On my very first assignment in Savannah, Georgia, I just remember going to this church. One of the other operators invited me to go to church, and I joined a life group. And my wife was a part of one of those life groups. I remember it was about a week or so before Thanksgiving. I was talking to my life group about how I wanted to stay in town because at a mall, Black Friday is huge in terms of sales. So I wasn't going to go home to Washington, D.C., where my parents were, have a great dinner, and then 2 hours later get on a plane to fly back. So I was just going to spend Thanksgiving in my hotel, eat a steak, watch some football. And my now wife looked at me and said, you know what? Why don't you come over to my house for Thanksgiving? And what I thought was crazy is I was expecting what Thanksgiving was like in my family. There's 4 of us. We're sitting around a table. Everything's just very quiet. But what I experienced was over 50 people all in the same house, just loving Thanksgiving and loving being around each other. And it was a phenomenal experience. So we ended up dating long distance for about 15 months. We were engaged for 4. And in August of 2018, we got married. And now we've been married just under 6 years, which is fun. So to kind of back up a little bit, I transitioned to from the leadership development program to the owner-operator side of things. And in, it was probably March of 2019, my wife and I moved to Oklahoma and took ownership of our first location in Lawton, Oklahoma, which I just love because I refer to it as if it was the San Angelo of Oklahoma. It was a small town, military influence, had one college, and had so many things that were similar to what San Angelo was. So my wife and I immediately got plugged in and just loved the team and the community that we got to be a part of. We went through COVID in this mall and had some unique challenges that went through that, but we loved Lawton. So it's actually where we had our first son as well. So we started in, he was born in 2020, February, so right in the middle of COVID. So that was a fun time. And then we decided to relocate to Little Rock, Arkansas, took ownership of our second location in Little Rock in February of 2022. So we transitioned here and had our second son in June of that year. His name is Marcus, and really have been over this location since then. We've joined a church, joined a couple of organizations like C12, and we have our own life group. And yeah, that's really what's gotten us here today. One of the exciting things that we're working on right now is we just started the adoption process. So we're looking at bringing in 2 to 4 kids, a sibling group, into our household. So yeah, it's a little bit about the Harding family and what has put us in the seat today. So as you can see, I didn't time myself, but that was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 minutes. It's an expanded story that talks about who I am. And if you had previously watched my 30-second story or even my 2-minute story, you'll see that I unpacked very similar concepts. I even used similar jokes and went from pillar to pillar. But this is what I would always have in your back pocket. Have that 10-minute story that you can unpack 20, 25, 30 different pillars that you can just flow from one to the other, just in case you are asked this question. Because you never want to ramble. You want to make sure you're talking about the right things and you're going into high level high level topics throughout your entire spiel. So that's my 10-minute story. Leave a comment below of your thoughts. This is one of those things that you aren't going to be asked too often. But thank you once again for watching Memorable in Minutes, episode 6, and we'll see you next week. Y'all have an amazing day.